Right, good morning everyone, and thank you to Tim Insight for enabling me this time to present these buildings to you. So I'm really excited about this because sort of going to feature probably two of my favourite buildings, excuse me, that we've sort of designed in the last couple of years. And even to this day, I still get sort of people talking about them and coming up to me. And I think certainly the kindergarten building was quite a revolutionary project for its time. It's probably six or 7 years old now. Since then, we've done another couple of buildings for this campus. But just to kind of frame the discussion, I'm talking about three projects, primarily the John Septimus Roe Kindergarten building, which is in Beachbody in West Australia for those who aren't in West Australia. Another building on the same campus, which is their Senior Learning Centre. And then, time permitting, I'll be talking about the master planning that we've done for their Beachbody Campus to redesign the school, probably or 40 to 50% of the school, and how those sort of concepts have kind of permeated all of these different designs and inform these different designs. So just to give a little bit of background about the school, because when you look at these buildings, you look at these spaces and you go, wow, you know, you must have had a huge budget to do this. And, you know, are they in this kind of affluent area? Well, they're not. They're in Mirrabooka, which is sort of a suburb north of Perth. It's a very, very low socioeconomic area, and it is in a low fee paying school. So one of the real big challenges for these projects were extremely tight budgets. And that kind of kick-started with the kindergarten building in particular, because that was the first one that we kind of said, well, you know, maybe we shouldn't use brick and concrete in this building, and is there a better way? So I'll start with JSR Kindy and go through some slides. So this, you know, our real challenge was to, and it really wasn't much of a big challenge, to be honest, was to provide them with a better space than what they had for their kindergarten program. And these are sort of, actually I'll go back to that. There's a kind of couple of shots of their existing spaces. So these spaces were dated, cluttered, face brickwork, you know, no light, very, very uninspiring spaces. And this was quite typical of the existing buildings on that campus as well. So we were sort of asked to come up with a solution to build a new develop looking at their existing buildings to start with for a 60-place teaching area, and to try and utilise as many environmental aspects that we could within that. But the sort of overarching theme was to provide spaces that had a nurturing quality about them. So when you look at their existing buildings or their existing spaces, you could argue quite readily that they were very uninspiring and unnurturing. So hence, looking back at it, the solution wasn't that hard to develop. So we have an existing campus. We looked at a couple of other buildings there. We did some analysis on converting them, but it just became expensive and we really couldn't get the solution out of it. So we came up with the ideal solution, which was really to build a new building, to leave the old building stock there, which could be sort of recycled. It made more sense to kind of build a new building. Our budget for this project was $880,000. So that was the absolute upper limit that included, you know, basically everything. So that was a budget that was given to us by the school board. So the first sort of thought I had was, how do we create, with the budget that much, being that much restricted, how do we get a really, really simple building? Most simplest building would be a square. And we came up with sort of an idea of encompassing these sort of 20 children's spaces within one area, condensing the toilet block and this sort of ablution area and the services to a simple core. So we ended up with a relatively square building, the core within one corner, and then this idea of an open space. Now, when we first proposed the idea of an open space for 3 kindy spaces, everyone, you know, there was certainly some discussion about whether that was feasible with noise and noise control and all the rest of it. And then we sort of embarked on this design development process. So there's the spaces, and I'll just zoom in on those so everyone can kind of get a better kind of sense of what we're talking about. And the whole idea of this building was that it was set up on a grid. So it's set up on a 2.4 by 2.4 grid. On those primary grid locations on the external wall, there is an LVL column, and it is then infilled essentially, gang nail roof trusses that run across in both directions, and then infilled with what I call double layer timber studding on the exterior. But the plan was extremely simple and really intended to be that way for a lot of reasons, as you'll see in the next couple of slides. So this was one of our sort of preliminary, well, it was preliminary, it ended up being a final, but it was certainly one of our sort of early concept drawings that we did to understand the space. And I remember literally going into the office one morning and saying to my guys, look, you know, this thing is just not working. We had gang nail roof trusses, we had ceilings below. We were kind of looking at, you know, this thing of gang nail roof truss being something that you would hide and it would disappear. And what happened was that we were literally putting ceilings through at 2.4 metres. And again, the space was uninspiring. We were sort of using timber in a very conventional way. So I came in one morning and said, look, this is not working, but I've just got this idea. So I said to one of the guys in the office, look, just quickly model this and just put material on the faces of these gang nails and just see what happens to the space. And that became the sort of catalyst for this design. So we ended up using really these gang nail roof trusses, which were extremely economical. But the building system was really just a raft slab, series of LVL columns supporting the gang nails, and then everything was clad in ply. And the way we'd set up the grid, the idea was that we would not have to trim the plywood sheets. So the plywood sheets would come in at 2.4 by 1.2, and the idea was literally they would be delivered to site, and then everything would sort of fit together as a jigsaw puzzle. This was a little bit of the sort of research on materials and textures, but I was really into minimising, you know, the use of materials as such. So the timber plywood that we use within the teaching spaces was applied everywhere, and it was done for a lot of different reasons. But you know, one of the important things was in these sort of spaces, you really don't want painted surfaces because they become hard to maintain. Kids run into them, and you know, they become impactful and things like that. So to eliminate the idea of maintenance, we said, well, we'll leave the plywood as it is and just clear seal it. One of the unexpected things that came out of it is this little blank of colour in the background. So a lot of the buildings I'd seen prior to this used primary colours. You know, you go to a kindergarten or something like that and they'd put red everywhere and primary blues and things like that, just as a token kind of sense of putting colour in. But, you know, we wanted to really restrain the use of colour in this so that it became just almost like a peel away, like when you peel away an orange and you have a reveal to it. So we put this sort of spectrum of colours again, you know, as this idea against the wall, which was quite clever because we ended up winning the National Dulux Award for just that wall, which is literally only 6 metres long. So then we sort of looked into this idea of, I came up with this idea of sort of puzzles and, you know, how could we incorporate this idea of a puzzle within the shape and things. And we started sort of testing some of the ideas around furniture. So furniture to us, or storage elements within the space, should be flexible. There shouldn't be anything within a classroom which is rigid and fixed, because spaces evolve and you really want to give the teachers and the students the opportunity to reconfigure spaces as they wish. So what we did was we sort of came up with these ideas of these quite unique kind of storage elements that then became dividers. which also by default became sort of play spaces for the children as well. Okay, so this is my go-to kind of sketch, I suppose, because it sort of reveals the simplicity of what really this building is about. And I'll try and zoom in a little bit so everyone can kind of see it. So we literally just have a raft slab, 100mm raft slab that sits on the ground. In one corner, you can see there is a service core, a series of primary timber LVL columns that sit in the wall surfaces all the way through. The trusses that sit in two directions, a primary direction and then sort of secondary ones in filling. Timber framework, which I'll talk about in a second, cladding on the outside, some very restrictive glazing, which was double glazing, which was used. And then this sort of idea of these sort of ceiling panels that attenuate the space, so acoustically attenuating the space. And my kind of go-to roofing material, which was a Kingspan product, which has got an amazing R value, and you can create sort of an airtight type ceiling of the building. Skylights at sort of high level. So one of the things you'll see in some of these images I show you is that there's this beautiful sense of natural light that permeates the space. So quite intentionally, we've used, narrow, small windows which go full height from ground to first floor level within this space. The idea being that children of sort of 3 and 4 years of age aren't that big. So, it is relative to their scale, and they get sort of views in and outside of the building. So I'll talk about the building system here, because this building took just over 4.5 months to construct from the site works. And the benefit of this is literally that you can see here, the site works were just scraped. The site was just scraped. Concrete slab went down a few days later. All of the timber wall frames had already been pre-manufactured, so they were literally just delivered to site. So primary framing, including the sort of gangland roof trusses here in the centre, were put into position. And what we did, there's actually, in this building here, there is one single, I think it's 100 by 100 RHS that sits in the centre of the space. It picks up the longest axis of the gangland trusses. Those gangland trusses in that direction, I think, are going 18 metres, so it picks up a sort of 9 metre span in that centre part. Timber bracing applied to the sort of external skin. Skylights and roofing, as you can see, with the Kingspan product and those skylights going in. Membrane wrapped on the outside. And then the sort of CFC exterior cladding being applied to the external face. And sort of parallel to that, once we'd got sort of roofing and skylights installed, ceilings, fixed cabinetry, the plywood lining. There was a fair bit of work, I'd have to say, in the application of that plywood lining, because there's quite a few square metres of it. And we had, I think, again, the sort of magic of using or doing a building like this is you're restricting the number of trades that you have. So whilst we had, bathrooms, and there was some tiling in the bathrooms, certainly, primarily this building is a raft slab. Yes, it's a wet work. Everything else from framing, roofing, plywood linings is really all a carpentry trade. So we had some exceptional carpenters that we kind of had pushed to this sort of to a sort of joinery level of finish as well. So what we were after was sort of this crafting and junctions of materials that require precision, and certainly we did have some amazing trades on this. Coloured wall panels were installed. There's a shot of the off-site cabinetry, so you can start to see that puzzle idea and those coming into fruition, and then sort of external painting. And then just a little bit of detail. So I wanted to give everyone a little bit of detail about, I guess, the important, as I see them, the really important and unique sort of elements of this build, although, you know, using really quite simple system. But you'll see there right in the centre, and this was that steel column I was talking about. So that is the only steel column and the only piece of steel in this whole building. And just sort of flicking through, obviously the sort of truss connection detail, using plates. What's probably not shown in here is we did go through afterwards. So they assembled this generally with, you know, nail guns and these sort of stacked plates, and then we did reinforce some of the primary sort of truss connections using steel plates and bolts. Because you can see, this would have been one of my defect shots, and you can see in there the sort of gap between those two trusses there. Okay, this area here, this is sort of the sort of really important kind of space, because you can sort of see this double stud wall that I'm talking about. So within the LVL, I think was a 190, and then what we had was we had two 90mm studs with a 10mm gap in them. Now, this was done for a number of reasons. One was to increase the wall thickness to enable us to put in a couple of layers of insulation. The other one was that, you know, and I said to the guys in my office that we would be absolutely crucified if this building felt hollow or had a you know, a sense of sound transmission from the inside to the outside as well. So what we did was we detailed everything to be double stud all the way through, and to create this disconnect, we had two layers of 90mm with a 10mm gap. You can see in this shot here, and I'll zoom in again, the sort of idea of this sort of double studding, and you can see right in the centre of that area there, that was on the 2.4 grid, and the sort of the LVLs going in place. Floor connections, so to tie down this whole building, you can see in this shot here the LVL going to the ground, the double studding, and then an angle bracket fixing straight into the concrete floor, and then bolting through that element to tie the building down. Again, quite really simple, easy to do sort of fixes, nothing required to be cast in, just really quite conventional. And again, you know, all of these things sort of translated to this benefit of cost. Just window flashings, obviously, a really important type of detail. Here you can see the sort of during the installation and the wall back installation coming in. So we were using two layers of R2.5 in this. In the roof product, in the Kingspan product, we got an R5 as well. And using double glazing, we ended up with this really sort of totally airtight space. And I was pretty, I suppose not adamant, but pretty forceful about the notion of this building being airtight, and it was certainly detailed that way. And, you know, one of my jobs on site was really to critique the builders' work in that, to make sure that sort of these areas and these junctions were airtight, and we could achieve what we were trying to do with this building. Plywood cladding to the trusses. This is sort of a junction of those trusses. So in the centre of those, we've sort of infilled that with a little bit of timber to create this sort of negative detail. It probably shows up better in the later slide. Cabinets turn up, and we are sort of here on site. So this is a shot from the oval side, and we're just using standard 9mm CFC on the outside of this building. Again, with not a lot of money to spend, but we were just looking at, you know, where do you spend the money and how do you create you know, a magic about it. So this is just as you walk into the space, just off the entrance lobby, these sort of pigeonhole units, again utilising plywood, exactly the same sort of material to create sort of storage areas. This is one of my favourite shots, which is a view straight up to the ceiling. So when we took these photos, I said to the photographer, "Can I borrow a camera? I just need to lie down on the floor." And I laid on the floor and I said, "Oh, there's this great shot on the ceiling." And she's like, "What do you mean by that?" I said, "Look," she says, "Look, just take the camera, take the shot." So I ended up doing that. And you can sort of see here that the area on the right-hand side is actually one of the skylights that runs through. And then you see these acoustic panels. Now, again, everything was pre-designed. So these panels sit exactly within this sort of 2.4 grid. They're sort of secret fixed. And what they do is they provide this attenuation at high level. So when you walk into this space, you can literally have these 3 groups of children, 3 groups of 20 spread within the space. And acoustically, everything is audible. It is really not, the level of reverberation within the space is down to a minimum. The acoustic panels do an amazing job. The vertical parts of the plywood trusses that we've clad almost act like little sort of sound stops in a way, because what they do is they force sound in all directions, and it bounces and fragments throughout the space. On the floor, we just ended up using just an acoustic, very fine acoustic vinyl. Again, nothing really expensive about it at all. You can see in here just some of the nice little details. So on the back here, what we did was on that sort of back area where the stainless steel fixing is, that's the LVL. So this LVL column that sits within the wall face is actually expressed inside. And that gave us the tolerance to utilise these sort of 2.4 sheets. So anything which was, if there was a little bit of give and take, it was over that particular zone there. And you can see some of the sort of nice little detailing on the plywood storage boxes, pigeonhole units. There's a shot of the LVL, which is just, again, you have favourite photos in different jobs, and that's probably one of my favourite photos as well. And our idea for, in these teaching spaces, teachers just want to litter the place with kids' artwork, and it's always with blue tack, bloody sticky tape, all those sorts of things. So what we said was, how about we could give you a solution, which is a stainless steel rod, and then you just use pegs. And then what happens is, you can change the kids' artwork. It's really easy, and you adapt it with pegs. So throughout this space, you'll probably see it in a later image. There are these sort of stainless steel wires that sit on the wall, and all the artwork that comes in and out. These puzzle pieces, which were really designed, again, as sort of a storage device. So they have, in a second, you'll see some photos of the ability to open them up. They became play areas for children. And just go back to that one. And what we did was because they became a little bit top heavy, they've got ballast in them. So they obviously, you can move them. Some of the teachers like them as screens, some put them up against the wall. But all of these timber storage elements within this space are all on casters. There is nothing which is fixed. There is only one fixed element in there, which is their smart board that they have. I think I mentioned before the Dulux Award that we won. And literally that is just MDF. So that is, I think, 9mm MDF panels with a little groove within them. Pre-painted off-site and brought on site and sort of stuck in a series of amazing Dulux colours. Again, the use of colour being sort of not forthright, but sitting within the spaces. This is, again, sort of one of the key kind of images that describes the space. But you can kind of see really that the lighting that's installed in there is hardly ever used, because there's certainly this amazing natural light that comes through from the top. You'll see that on the window elements, there's 2 sort of windows, a very high level window and then a mid-level window. Now, the mid-level windows are just simply casements, The top ones are awning windows, and they're all electrically operated. So in order to get cross-flow ventilation within the space, you literally press a button and they all open up automatically. And you end up with this beautiful sort of breeze running through the spaces. But again, there is so much sort of opportunity to capture breezes and run air through this building. The air conditioning system is not really, I have never really seen it being used, other than maybe like the coldest winter's day that we've had sort of here in Perth a few weeks ago. But these spaces, when we look at our brief, I look back at the brief, and the primary objective of this and the key word was nurturing. These spaces have got a magic and a balance. There's certainly an energy within them when you walk into them. So you feel calm. There is this little sense of, colour that kind of lifts it. But from a user perspective, the end result was that we provided I think, an amazing, high-quality building to a school, to a very, very low fee-paying school, and a sort of pretty ordinary kind of community environment. And certainly this building, from the teachers' perspective, so I've had teaching staff come up to me and say how remarkable, how this has just changed their whole ability to teach, and obviously it impacts on the children immensely as well. And then just think, this is this first part, so I think I'm running okay for time, but those two little rugrats that were in those images, actually my two kids, so they weren't hired models, they were sort of very free, no fee paying models. Okay, I'll go on to the next building there, which is the Senior Learning Centre that we did for John Septimus Roe. So basically this school is set across two campuses, one which is their sort of their junior school, and the other one is the senior school. So again, within the same kind of context of the area. And our brief was they had years 11 and 12, which were basically for the last couple of years sort of been taught out of sheds in this sort of make together teaching spaces. So the campus had sort of done some previous work on different areas, and they wanted to provide a all-encompassing single building for their years 11 and 12. And the brief for this was these kids or young adults just about to go to uni, we need to provide them with a building which is befitting of that. But again, we haven't got lots of money to do it. This building cost in the realm of $2,600 a square metre to build, which when you look at it, it's even for me, it sort of defies belief really. So we have an existing campus, really tight sort of footprint of area, and we've identified an area of the site, and we came up with this idea of doing an L-shaped building. It needed to be two-storey because there's 240 students within it. So that sort of limited our scope, I suppose, of being able to use timber in a significant way, as we had done in the kindergarten project. But to look at different ways of how we could use timber within the building from a cost benefit as well as an architectural benefit. So what we had was really very, very simple plan. Again, I love simple plans. An L-shaped building, the idea of creating an auditorium in this sort of central space, and I call it sort of like the inverted egg. So I must have just done a circle on a bit of paper, and then all of a sudden it just turned into an egg. And to sort of create different spaces that students could go into for learning. So different study areas across the whole building. But again, a relatively very, very simple sort of plan. And, the simple plan and the sort of the sort of logic behind that is really to try and control cost. I mean, this building is sort of, you know, many sort of millions of dollars by default because of its floor area. So we need to sort of control cost in a simple way. So you can see in here, so each floor, this is a view of the ground floor, but the first floor is absolutely identical to this. So we have sort of an entrance lobby at sort of positions number 2, a couple of stairs to the first floor, and this sort of central auditorium, and where we've got labelled number 15 there, that's a sort of this big kind of tiered auditorium area that we had an idea for. All of the different sort of teaching spaces, and then number 9 is sort of a study space that opens up onto the oval on the outside. First floor level pretty well repeats itself. And our biggest opportunity for the use of timber in this particular project was really across this main auditorium area. And you can see it dotted in the background here. So these sort of crisscrosses that run through. So what we did was we sort of, and I'll come to the, this sort of cross section that kind of gives away the story, is we wanted to do this whole roof in timber framing. So we ended up using pretty big LVLs. I think these were sort of 600 or 700 mils deep. There is only the big, massive spans here. So we're sort of talking 18-metre spans. I think we ended up with one single UB beam that runs through the centre of this sort of mid-span of this plan. And you can see again sort of the ideas from the kindergarten building certainly flowing into this one as well, although when you see the architecture, you'll see that it's very, very different. Okay, the kind of cross-sectional plan. So you can see here sort of 2 levels. We used the primary sort of construction system here for the walls is actually concrete tilt panels, but they are insulated tilt panels. So we used a Nirvana system, and we were able to get a really good R value out of these, which is, you know, conventionally not the case. So normally, if you're using tilt panels, you start putting all the internal linings and things like that in them. We wanted to leave the raw concrete tilt panels exposed internally. So this is using a Nirvana system. So it's basically a concrete pour of about 50 mil, a 60 mil sort of insulation, and then a topping slab on the outside. So they become quite wide and everything, but thermally they produce great R value. And you can see again at the top, the series of sort of LVLs running all the way through, this acoustic ceiling. Then we've done some really special things in some of the teaching spaces, which we'll see. Let's see, I'm going for time. Okay. So you'll see here, this is, you know, a shot of the roofing framing going in. So LVLs conventionally fixed with sort of angles between each other. Sort of standard connectors. So this is sort of the roof going on at high level. And we doubled up on a lot of these just because of the sheer span and rigidity that was needed at this upper level. This is a view to the ceiling in the main auditorium space just starting to take shape. Plywood cladding. These guys the joinery guys were really, really good. Again, acoustic tiles and skylights coming in. That central auditorium I spoke about, starting to take shape. Using timber lining boards in teacher spaces. I'll talk about this in a second, which is our acoustic timber ceiling to the teaching spaces. This whole motif, you'll notice in this sort of whole motif of sort of triangle running through, and it kind of permeates all of the elements. So here's a view to the sort of the entrance now, as I'm sort of running out of time, I think, is that curved element is actually a Luca bond, but that Luca bond is all timber frame. So that whole egg element within the centre is timber framed. The entrance roof truss there that you can see with the Luca bond on the face, the only concrete elements of these sort of full double height story tilt panels on the outside. Now, I'll just quickly talk about these internal teaching spaces. So you'll see that we created these panels, and there's a lot of repetition in them, even though it doesn't look like it. But we ended up sort of shaping these panels to create this almost perfect acoustic type environment. The concrete walls in the background you can see are left as they are. This particular classroom has got a link, which is why there's bifolding doors on the right-hand side. And those ceiling panels, accommodate the air conditioning system, the lighting system. They all overlap each other, so it's relatively easy for the installation. There is a magical quality about these classrooms. It does feel like you're, at Cambridge University, let alone, the Mirrabooka University. And there's just really nice refinement, I think, in a lot of the way that these materials come together. On the right-hand side there, you can see the off-form concrete and the timber as contrast, and just overlapping. Nothing sort of cut or has to be scribed or anything like that. Again, equal emphasis on teacher prep areas. So these are some of the background teacher prep areas. Some shots of the ceiling. Again, I think the same thing. I was telling the photographer how to take that photo. And then, one of the big things is lockers in these buildings, and trying to be able to accommodate them. And certainly, we've built these things in, and they sort of look integrated within the space. This is a great photo. Really does show. I'll go back to that one. Really does show the space and how uplifting and inspiring it is. All of the kids absolutely loved our design. I'd have to say that they were just like, man, this is cool. Like, we're talking kids' language, and it was very, very, very cool. Quite dynamic, but certainly befitting of project, that particular project. So the last thing I'll talk about, and I've probably got 3 minutes to quickly go through this one, I think, is we were asked a couple of years ago, this project's actually on hold, but it's a worthy project of looking at, because here we're proposing, this is the Beachbody Campus where we had designed the kindergarten building, and we were asked to master plan and get rid of all these horrible buildings that I showed you earlier in the thing. So we proposed the demolition of a series of buildings and integration and this sort of grouping and housing of new teaching spaces. Oops. I'll go back. So what we did was we looked at kind of the key core design principles of sort of cross-flow ventilation, what this architecture would be, and we were kind of inspired by the idea of colour of pencils, and then connection, so connection within the building and within the campus linkages. So this is a proposal for a single-storey set of teaching spaces, utilising these sort of internal areas as default teaching spaces and hanging spaces. And all of these areas open up onto the outside. Every classroom has a veranda. And again, 100%, this is a 100% timber frame building. This sort of view probably gives it away a bit better, or kind of gives you an insight into the logic and the planning of it. And then the use of timber within the spaces. So we're sort of colour coding different areas with possible vinyl sort of floor colours and things, using timber as this, sorry, I keep jumping around everywhere. The building system itself, very, very similar, different kind of emphasis and certainly a different flow within the space. Some overall views of the campus. Using colour pretty strongly within the external cladding. Some of the internal spaces or concepts for the internal spaces, playing around with coloured timber. These are views from the sort of breakout and activity areas. And I think just because of time, I will wrap it up there. I always acknowledge, when we do this sort of buildings, that there has to be there has to be a really good client, right? So Matthew Hughes was the principal of this school for a number of years. He's now a member of Parliament, believe it or not. He's moved on, but without his support and his support of our vision, none of these projects would have been possible. So I always credit Matthew with his great support of our practice. So what I'll do now is I will just stop sharing and hand over to Greg.
Tom, thanks very much. I mean, that was excellent. And just seeing some of the chat comments coming back, just about the simplicity of the buildings, particularly with the kindergarten project, just how straightforward it was to be able to create, using straightforward structural materials, create such an open plan building. So it was great.
Thank you, mate.
Look, so we'll have a look at some of the questions. And starting off with, why did the steel column need to be steel and not timber? I mean, I know it's a big area, but your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an engineering question. You have to ask the engineer, but I think it would have been really bulky. We did look at that, and the net result was that it needed to be really large, and we didn't want to have that big kind of column. We couldn't kind of bridge that column within the space, so the steel column was the answer.
Yeah, yeah. What is the Kingspan R5 ceiling product? You maybe
I can
elaborate on that a little.
Yeah, I can let everyone know on that one. It's a membrane clad material, so it goes down to about 1.5 degrees, and you insulate and things like that. So I use it on all of our buildings now because I just think it's amazing, and it doesn't have much support, so it can span 3 meters, 2.4 meters. So you can bring this, which is really in that building. You can see there it's supported at 2.4 meter centers.
Yeah. Yep. How did you satisfy the access and mobility to the upper level?
That's got lifts. So that building has actually got a lift in it, in the Senior Learning Centre.
Right, yep. In the Senior Learning Centre, this is from Peter, what plywood cladding on the LVL trusses effectively hiding the LVL, or he's sort of questioning, did he sort of see that wrong? And if you'd considered using plywood box beams instead?
We looked at plywood box beams. The simplest, the most economical way ended up being the gang nails. And we did clad those LVLs because they were quite, I mean, they're pretty rough. I mean, they are sort of just got a saw cut face to them and pretty rough. And we need to get the connectors in as well. So those trusses have got fairly big spans on that particular project.
Yeah, yeah. In this, hang on a sec. How do these spaces perform with thermal heat gain through the skylights?
It's minimal because there's enough. There's a lot of ventilation through those spaces. They're actually the insulated. So those skylights are the insulated system that Kingspan provides. So you end up with an R value on those as well.
Yep. And from Tom, what is the square metre cost of the kindergarten?
2,400 square metre.
Right. Yep. Were the cross spans in the shape of a cross, an X, used for aesthetic purpose, or was it used for structural load sharing? Also in the senior project as well.
Senior Learning Centre, yeah. No, we just did it from an architectural perspective.
Yep, it just works so well.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Question for me, just in regard to the the use of trusses in the wall framing and trusses. Were the wall frames constructed on site or prefabricated?
Prefabricated. Yeah.
Okay. And what about sort of that early collaboration in the sort of structural requirements, of course, to be able to achieve this building?
Yeah, we spoke extensively. So our dialogue was extensive with the framing contractor. So we'd sort of spoken to him, I think, even before we had a builder on site, or well before we kind of considered appointing a builder. So we'd been going back and forth with them on sort of preliminary costings and how we could get some of the sort of cost benefits of using the material and how it would be done. So that discussion happened very, very early in the piece, once we had our preliminary sort of concepts together. Yeah. And then I was quite amazed at the dollar value, to be honest. When I sort of saw what that structure was to establish, it was a no-brainer. And of course, when we were on site, I think the contract was appointed, the builder was appointed 4 weeks before we got to site. Literally all that wall framing and stuff was all done within 1 week. They were starting to position those on the slab. Yeah, yeah.
And the overall time saving for, say, this sort of construction method versus something more sort of concrete or brickwork or whatever, the time benefit you felt you achieved?
I reckon it's a couple of months. Yeah, for sure. I mean, this was done in 4.5 months, literally. From access to site to handover, total handover. So, yeah, look, a building like that, I would imagine is, somewhere in the sort of 6 month, 6.5 month process.
Right. Just a question from Graham. What is the CFC?
9 mil.
Elaborate on that. And I'll just try in another one. Is there a maintenance impost from the CFC external cladding? And what is the design lifespan of the building? So just, what is CFC, and then the implications of maintenance and lifespan?
Yeah, it's just painting. I mean, CFC lasts forever anyway. It's a Hardie's product, a 9 mil Hardie's product, which has been used. It's, impact, it's really robust. It's a great material. It is a very underrated material, I would say. People tend to everyone's gone down the Lukabon sort of route, but I think, there is a place for that type of product. Most of the buildings, educational buildings become painted surfaces or painted concrete tilt panels and things like that. So, the maintenance is the paintwork, really.
Yep, and a choice of a good quality paintwork.
Yeah.
Yep. Did the theory of not cutting the plywood when cladding the trusses work?
It worked in one direction, but not the opposite direction. So if that makes sense. So one of the sheets was full sheet, and then the intermediate sheet had to be cut.
Yep. From Peter, what type, if any, chemical termite treatments were used?
Yeah, we've used a reticulated underfloor system. So that just gets maintained. So under slab all the way through.
Yeah. And of course, our structural framing was H2 treated pine anyway, but of course there's a lot of other timber materials in there. Were the other timber products treated at all for H2 or 3, or just that?
Just the structure, yeah.
Just the primary ground level whole of building protection.
Yeah.
This is from Adrian. What fireproofing was used in to the timber framing?
None. It's not required. It's Type C construction.
Okay.
Isolated building within.
Elaborate around the performance of the building for fire protection.
It's Type C construction. So Type C construction, it's basically isolated from the rest of the campus. So, and it sits well underneath the requirement of any level of FRL to the structure.
Yeah. From Michael, how far can you span a gangnail truss and what sort of dimensions does it have, i.e. overall depth, size and timber members?
Yeah, that, I think we got an 8 or 9 metre clear span in that kindergarten project. Overall depth was just maybe, I'd have to double check it, but I'm pretty sure it was around the 750 mark.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, this just a comment here or a question, I suppose. Trusses and wall frames. Did you mean that the trusses and wall frames were pre-procured? So, of course, we're talking about fabricated and
yeah, all shop detailed. I mean, we had to get that ground slab obviously accurate, which was a given. But no, all of that was done off our architectural drawings.
Yeah. What about the feedback that you've had now? The school's been, being used now actively as for its purpose for a couple of years, depending on the stages. But what's been that benefit of it being a timber building, and from the point of view of this educational facility? Yeah,
I think the big benefit is it's a couple of. It's all encompassing. I don't think there's not one magic solution from it. So from a teacher perspective, the functionality of the building, the standard and quality of the materials within it, acoustically how it performs. It's very quiet as well. So when you walk into it, it's very quiet. There's a road, there's literally a highway 100 metres away, and you really get no road noise off that. So this building performs both inwards and outwards. Natural light, ventilation. I mean, it really, it's all encompassing. I mean, the big thing though, the biggest overarching thing for me is really the social benefit to the children and that community as a whole. So that is, a beautiful building. With a very, very inspiring, nurturing space, and it's provided within a community that wouldn't normally have access to that type of building. So I think that's, for me, that's the legacy, if anything.
And that sort of degree of timber, natural timber that was featured, is there a sense from the teaching staff or the students that a better sense of well-being? In that environment, perhaps compared to maybe even your other experiences, or of course, teachers' experiences?
Yeah, I think totally. I think it's just, you can look at the images, but the other part is to go into the space. And when you go into the space, the amount of timber and that sort of sense of calmness that it provides is really the big tick box. I think that is its real point of difference. It is all inspiring, it's nurturing, it's quiet. It just has, the natural timber material gives it this innate warmth, of a better word.
Yeah. And the last question, what was the finish used to the internal ply?
It's a water-based sealer.
Yep. Yep. Multiple coat or?
I think it was 2, but it's, literally we looked at a lot of different sealers because we didn't want the sealer to go yellow and tinge and, sort of magnify the colour. I actually liked the raw ply finish, to be honest. I would have, if it was possible, I would have left it as that, but we had to put something on it. So it's a matte clear sealer, water-based sealer.
Okay. Look, great, Tom, and just a final comment I saw there that just coming up, just saying a brilliant and inspiring design. So that's just an element of the feedback that was coming back.
Oh, thank you.
So, look, okay, well, look, that'll be the end of our Q&A then, Tom. So I'm going to just pick up on the screen. And so we've just, thanks for that, for our Q&A. And again, just thanks very much, Tom, for your presentation. And I think we've got a lot of benefits and over 400 people sort of logging in and benefiting from your presentation. I think it would have been accepted really well. I would just again bring up those CPD questions. So if anybody wants to take a snapshot of those, if you're wanting to submit those for your CPD certificate. And I'd also like to just reinforce the benefit of the Wood Solutions website, www.woodsolutions.com.au, and the availability of such a broad range of technical, engineering and design information for you, such as the timber design guides, a couple of them featured there, over 50, I think it's 51 timber design guides and more that are being produced at the moment. So some exceptional and detailed documentation there for you in timber specification, and also a range of other services and benefits that are provided on the website in areas of timber specification and case studies of various projects. So certainly check out that website if you haven't already done so, and register to receive the online newsletters and the like. Now we also have a new initiative from Wood Solutions, is In Focus, and In Focus are YouTube videos of a range of different topics. And the first of those that have been launched are on the subject area of how it's made. And so you've got a series of short videos there just showing the industry production and association with softwoods, with hardwoods, also with LVL manufacture and cross-laminated timber. And we've got the next topic coming up, which is apparently going to be on acoustics. So look, check out the In Focus In Focus videos on YouTube that are starting to be produced through Wood Solutions and Forest and Wood Products Australia. Again, thanks very much, Tom, for your presentation. Our next Wood Solutions webinar will be on Tuesday, the 18th of August at the same time. The topic will be efficient residential structural timber design and supply specifications, focusing on installation of roof trusses, and being presented by Nick Huey and Adam Dawson from Prida. So check out that one next Tuesday. And finally, this Thursday, the 13th of August, we continue our Timber Engineering Design webinar series with the fourth webinar being presented on the topic Systems Focus 1, which is timber frame construction, and covering structural engineering, detailing, fire, acoustics, procurement for timber frame construction, etc. So that's on at 9:30 this Thursday morning, Western Australian time, or 11:30 Sydney, Melbourne time. So tune in for that as well. I think we're getting a great following, and it's really going down well. So thanks everybody for attending. Thanks again to Tom and to Wood Solutions, and we look forward to seeing you again same time next week. Thank you.